Welcome to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Asfalis Advisors and the Disaster Recovery Journal. Crisis management in today's world is ever-changing, and this podcast is our commitment to help you navigate successful outcomes for any crisis you may face. I'm your host, Vanessa Matthews. I specialize in providing insights and solutions for crisis, continuity, and resilience across industries from real estate and healthcare to terrorism in the airline and transportation worlds. No matter what industry you're in, this podcast will provide you the tools to build resilience in your organization. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Resilience Decoded podcast. Today, I will be doing a session on what are the implications of the Great Resignation for business continuity. But before we get started, I'd like to share a few resilience resources and reminders. And as Asfalis News, please feel free to check out our show notes for today's episode and download our 5-step crisis strategy guide that you can use to navigate any crisis for any business in any industry. Secondly, if you would like to recommend a speaker for today's podcast, you can also check out the show notes there. And thirdly, if you would like to request me as a speaker for an upcoming program, the link for that is also available in our show notes. For Disaster Recovery Journal, please feel free to check out our show notes to get more information on the journal, upcoming events, and conferences for DRJ. And lastly, if our podcast is bringing value and you appreciate that, please feel free to rate us and give us a review on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts. This helps us to know that we're continuing to add value. So on to today's topic. As I was thinking about crisis management and the field that we're all in, I started to think about what I'm hearing from a lot of companies and organizations. So a few weeks back, I was talking to a professional services company that's about $30 million in revenue. And this organization has 3 opportunities to engage with their clients that are ranging between the $5 million to $10 million range. And this leader has said, hey, I haven't been able to sign any of my contracts with my clients for 2022 because I can't find my talent to hire them. And I was thinking like, wow, this is something that has definitely impacted the organization that I lead with Asfalis, but also we're hearing this with so many other clients. And so what I wanted to do was to take some time to talk about the Great Resignation and really what this means for the business continuity profession. And so a couple of things that I want to start with. First of all, psychologist professor at Texas A&M coined the phrase, the Great Resignation, as he began to do some analysis and some understanding of what may be the implications of COVID-19 back in 2020 when this thing really first popped off. And so through my research and some things that I've learned, there's a number of reasons of why people are leaving many organizations. It may be because they are changing their location or their geography. It might be because of a work-life balance. It might be because of culture. It might be just because of where they are in their career, and they may be looking to transition or do something different. Or these could also be resignations that people just didn't take advantage of in 2020 because of the pandemic. And so I don't really want to focus today on why people are leaving because the reasons may be different, but I do want to talk about a little bit of statistics and then get into some things that we're seeing from a business continuity perspective that you guys can take advantage of. What I'll also share is, you can always check out BC Management, major shout out to Cheyenne and Alicia Stevens. And they also have a lot of data on the reports and the trends and the numbers. And from everything that I've learned from them over the past few years, the trends in our industry are people are still looking and applying for jobs in our space. And so that's a wonderful win for our profession. However, there's a great article by Ergonomic Trends that kind of talks you through some of the statistics that they've seen across the country. And so Microsoft did a study for about 30,000 workers in 31 countries. And one of the points that was made is 41% of workers across the globe are considering leaving their jobs. So if you're in a specific country, don't be concerned. Your country is probably not the only one that's dealing with what this term has been coined as the Great Resignation. But I think that's pretty interesting that 41% of workers are still looking and considering leaving. But what that also means is that doesn't mean that they've made a decision to leave, but they are considering that. Secondly, through this survey, 55% of American workers have noted that they plan to look for a new job. And so what that really breaks down into is 70% of Black people and 67% of Hispanics have a plan to look for a new role in the coming year. 72% of workers who earn under $30,000 a year are also looking to transition out of their roles. And 77% of Gen Z and 63% of the millennial population plan to switch their jobs within the next 12 months. And so some of that just really may not be surprising news because it kind of aligns with some of the trends, especially when you think about the Gen Z and millennial workforce and how long they typically stay within a role. But that might help to give you guys some perspective on what the data says. Through some other research too, one thing that I'll note is I don't think that it's super critical to focus on how many people are potentially considering leaving the workforce. Although 2021, we saw the highest number of people leave and transition throughout the workforce. When you think about just from a US perspective, what the numbers are in our country, the Great Resignation is still not that much of a significant number where we should be taking pause. So specifically, when you think about staffing, resignations, the challenges of attracting, recruiting, and retaining and getting the candidates that you're actually looking for, what does that mean for those of us who are in the field of business continuity, for those of us who are supporting people in the business, for those of you who are tasked with supporting the contingency plans and organizations who may have key people that are critical to the organization, what does that mean for you? And so some things that we put together is number one, it may be a good time for you to take a second look at some of the plans and the recovery plans that you guys may have developed. Also, some of the controls that you might have in place and who those risk owners are for these various controls within the organization. What strategies might you need to put into place in order to reflect the current environment to support the constant change that may be happening for the next few years? It also might be a pretty good time to have an exercise on what do we do in the event of a staffing loss or great resignations, or if you have an employee strike and what that might mean for the organization. This could be a great time to have a partnership with your human resources teams and your operations teams to really talk through some of the key roles that you might have and key functions of the business so that in the event you experience lower staffing numbers, you guys can still continue to support and run the operation. Secondly, some things that you can consider for business continuity teams are how to determine what your essential functions are. So I always say processes run the business and technology supports those processes, but who's actually running the process? It's people, right? And so if you can take a second look at your critical business functions or your essential functions, whatever that term may be within your company, this may also be something that you can take a second look at and reprioritize. Are these critical functions still the case? Or in the event that this one function has one or two critical people, what's a different way that we might be able to reprioritize this or really start thinking about some contingencies in this role? The third thing that we can talk about today is what's the cost for you to be able to maintain the people that you need in key roles when people transition off? What is the actual plan to build the contingency so you don't have a dip in the outcomes or in the services that role may be delivering, whether it's to an internal client or to an external client? Consider that some organizations are now having to start to pay a premium for staffing companies. So just think about how that may change and how that may impact the costs and the expense of what the organization is trying to accomplish. Sign-on bonuses and investing in employee engagement and development. This may be a really good time to advise your clients within the business continuity teams on the importance of culture and the environment and the engagement so you can make sure that you keep the people that you have within the organization. And also considering if you have to, what does it look like for you to have to cut back hours and or services depending on the impacts that you may be experiencing from a staffing perspective. if you don't have the people that can help to deliver on the service level agreements for whatever the product or the service might be, which departments should you potentially be targeting for these conversations, and what contingencies can you help them to put in place? So again, just wanted to really have a great conversation with you guys on the implications of the Great Resignation for the business continuity profession. And until next time, we look forward to speaking with you again. Thank you for listening to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Aspalis Advisors and Disaster Recovery Journal. Make sure you check out the show notes for this episode to see all the upcoming events, programs, and ways we can support you. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a review, and share it with a friend. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.